bringing up, I only have a few slides today. Just by way of introduction, I'm a PMT. That's how it all starts. And I am a PMI ACP. So was one of the first registered education providers in the world to offer ACP training. And at one time, 5% of the world's ACPs came out of my classes. So that lets you know how early that was. Currently, I teach Disciplined Agile, and I am a safe implementation consultant at Siemens PLM. So that's an SPC. And I am Mr. Yellow on the screen here. So let's begin and just say Namaskar to all my friends from PMI Kerala Chapter. Thank you for this opportunity, everybody. Hello and welcome to all from anywhere who have come to make waves in 2020. It is a time to innovate and to create new ideas. It is really, really time. India, Europe, US, everywhere. We all live in one house, and it is a house on fire. And I will click and just go back one now. And I think we all know that we're speaking today in the context of the global COVID crisis of 2020. Let's acknowledge we traverse difficult, tempestuous territory. Last year, nobody in the world had or even contemplated a roadmap ready to meet this horrible storm we now face. But as project managers and agilists, we know that the map is not the territory. We can get by without a map by adapting to the latest science, by putting on our face masks. We know the territory. We know what's happening on the ground. We know that project managers live to deliver one-time products and services. We know how to adapt. We know how to be resilient. In this dire age, we will deliver the needful in pharma, supply chain, retail, innumerate other industries. We will frustrate this plague of our times. But today, honestly, the end is not in sight. I'm still waiting for the end of the beginning. Awful. Long-held systems, practices, even ways of being are inevitably destroyed in this cyclone. This is the way it has always been. This is the way it will always be. A bit of poetry that I love comes to mind. The center cannot hold. Things fall apart. Surely some revelation is at hand. With apology to Yeats for my poor paraphrasing, I always think of this poem and take heart in the coming revelation. Of course, being project managers by nature, we are fired up to create and reveal new things to supplant the destruction. We are key players in life's great cycle. And this PMI chapter, so kindly hosting us and me today from Kerala, embodies creation and innovation. Look at this wonderful event. After a decade of successful waves, everyone has come to expect learning, creativity, innovation, and frankly, the birth of new opportunities in 1,000 small and sometimes big ways. When the coronavirus hammer fell in February, it would have been easy to retreat, to social distance, to even hide. These guys and gals at Kerala PMI did no such thing. So congratulations to this wonderful chapter. Undoubtedly going to be the best chapter in the world one of these days when PMI gets their awards straight. The virtual events that we're doing today, the virtual events as they're going on right now, should be taken up permanently as a component of every live in-person event. Agile is all about adaptability and sustainable pace. Kerala's adaptations to the virus have shown us a new way and offer us ways to recognize something something clear and fundamental about sustainability. It is simply this. Give the daily commute time back to our families. Let the petrol stay in the tanks. Gasoline pollutes the environment. None of this is sustainable. Moving great masses of humanity every day to an office building is the folly of our industrial past and Taylorism at its worst. It is time to move on. Technology knocks on our door to help us adapt. WhatsApp, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, 100 other tools, they're, a penny a dozen. They're all ready. So I'm proud to say that my employer, Siemens Digital Industries, recognized this pretty quickly for a gigantic company. Only last week, Siemens announced the intent to allow people to work from home much more frequently. Already many work from home, but now it will become the norm. In-person events will be orchestrated only for the highest priority and focus. So my teams across the globe, across all time zones, across all continents are becoming virtual citizens, and this will help us to achieve sustainable pace. So sustainable pace is not just an agile development thing, it's a global thing, it's a humanity thing. We need to realize there's a lesson to be learned in COVID from this. We learned something else interesting at Siemens as well. My small division is about 130 Scrum teams, and Siemens, I think, has 18,000 software engineers overall, I think. My cohort aligns into about a dozen Agile release trains using safe and disciplined Agile coaching techniques. And for clarity, disciplined Agile embraces all Agile methods, all frameworks, all tools. It is pragmatic. Lean Agile is good Agile, yes? A hallmark of Lean Agile is this notion of standard work or working agreements. Now, standard work is fun. Standard work is a naughty little oxymoron Agile coaches like to dabble in with their teams. Think of the phrase jumbo shrimp. It's my favorite oxymoron. How can a shrimp be jumbo? Jumbo shrimp are not small, and standard work is by design not standard. Teams are meant to constantly refine their way of working, to tailor the process to their needs, to have their own way. This notion of process tailoring has always been sort of part of the Agile lore. It's this oral tradition of Agile. How do we tailor the process? With Disciplined Agile, we have actually got a field manual. We have an Agile book of knowledge that tells us how to tailor the process. This is quite incredible that we have this new tool. And by the way, I would like to thank all PMI members for your patronage and your support of PMI, because your support has given me the Way of Working book, the Agile book that you can all download if you're a member from PMI. And this book is a field manual with many, 800 different Agile possibilities. And this is just so cool to have this tool at my beck and call. But to get back to my Siemens story, we learned a lesson because we embrace standard work. We try to be as lean as possible. So of our 130 teams, all had slightly different notions of standard work appropriate to their local context. Their local contexts are wildly different. Some are co-located. We have teams in Pune that are co-located, teams in Texas, teams in California. Some are not. Some are radically not co-located at all. Most teams have at least one or two people that are somewhere else. Some teams are in the same time zone, but some are in 4 time zones. Some are using Scrum, some are not. Some have embedded architects, some do not. The list goes on and on and on. There's huge divergence. There's one thing that's common. They make decisions looking at the work right in front of them, knowing their local context better than anyone. This is the rule. When the pandemic hit, when the wheels fell off the bus, when we all got locked into our apartments, many teams still had innovative processes that were working, even though some other teams were dead in the water. But the teams that were working, their local processes designed to meet their local context turned out to be closer to the new normal. This was great. We had a reserve of good practices to fall back on. We could harvest these good practices and help everybody else come back to speed and come back to life. We could help these teams get reborn into this new normal. Through this diversity of thought, this leadership at all levels, teams leading themselves, coming up with their own standard work, leadership having this commitment to delegating decision-making authority, leaders at the highest level in our organization behind this. We discovered we still had some processes working well in the face of this terrific destruction. And so our way of working could be reborn. And it was reborn very quickly. And many of our software engineers now feel that they're more productive in this weird new normal. And by the way, if you use the SAFE framework, you know that big room planning is generally held with everybody being co-located. And you can imagine with big centers like we have all around the world with hundreds and hundreds of engineers, it was very hard for us to do program increment planning because there just weren't enough rooms. There weren't enough people to bring food in. The logistics were very challenging. It took us 2.5 to 3 weeks to get our program increment planning done just because of logistics. What we've come to know is now that we are 100% line, everybody is a virtual citizen. Nobody's driving into work every day. What we've come to know is we can get our PI planning done in 3 days, in 1 week. So our innovation and planning iteration has opened up more time, more precious time. And it's really quite incredible because we go out and we do hackathons. We let people go and explore things that interest them. And from that exploration, we get some of our best innovations, some of our most competitive ideas are coming up out of these hackathons. And those sticky little problems that every company has, and we all know what they are, those sticky little problems, they get resolved in hackathons. So first, let me just say, don't get me wrong here. Nobody was ready. 5 years ago, no one answered the old interview question, saying something like, 5 years from now, I will be surviving a pandemic, working out of my home office, homeschooling the kiddies, fighting to keep the cat off my conference calls and keyboards, whilst wearing a shirt and a tie with pajama bottoms on, and really needing to go and take a shower. No one could foresee this. No one had a risk register with a global pandemic line item on it, with a pale rider of the apocalypse mitigation strategy ready to go. Yet, because we embraced lean agile principles at Siemens, risk management was built right in. We were able to adapt very quickly. Our leaned out processes were there. This is quite a feat. This destruction that we're living through right now is a force majeure. We have no choice. The world has clearly reminded us that we are just passengers on this third rock from the sun, and certainly we are not in charge. However, we do oversee and control many things, which are much more mundane. And perhaps these things are still dire issues. We will overcome them. Perhaps it's a blessing in a small way, or at least there is a silver lining to this COVID cloud, that our typical skirmishes that we fight day to day now look pretty small and petty. The arguments that we had about, who's going to submit their code package first, or can I submit this code package without the testing written, they seem kind of silly in the face of, actually trying to survive out there. The pattern of destruction and creation is ever present. As I said, it's not new, and usually it's much more banal. So surely we'll be able to surmount these more conventional problems. So let me bridge back here to some of the more common destructive elements that we face. There are a lot of them. The cycle is the same. for big ones and for small ones. We must innovate our way out. As project managers, we must guide everybody forward. We're key players in the great cycle. Since I have 500 project managers in this webinar, I want to take this opportunity to make a call to action. Let's help the world as we help ourselves. Please end the troubling trend of premature corporate demise and resist the agile industrial complex. These are core things that PMI has embraced with the Disciplined Agile Toolkit. And let me unpack these for you, because there's nothing that I believe in much more than working on this. The Agile Industrial Complex, beware. I've heard many people talk about this. I've heard many people go on about the Agile Industrial Complex. It's a good Google to go out and look at it. Martin Fowler, one of the manifesto signatories, gave probably one of the best speeches on it in 2018. And there's lots of good websites. There's lots of material out there. But in Australia in 2018, I think Fowler gave the seminal speech. It's a good speech, worth a Google. The full transcript is out there. But for your reference and for the reference of those who may not have heard of this, USA President Eisenhower coined a similar phrase half a century ago. It still haunts Americans. It should haunt the world. It probably does. The phrase epitomizes Eisenhower's fears of the American military. In particular, the American military industrial complex becoming so powerful, too powerful, that perhaps even unintentionally, it would be able to create wars with the only motivation to go out and sell more arms. So here's a brief excerpt from his speech where he made this point. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. So to me, the feeling is exactly the same. And if I replace the word government with management, and I replace the word military with agile, we have an encapsulation of my personal feelings about the agile industrial complex. And it's really quite straightforward. And something that I've learned maybe in the past year or so, and something that's resonated so deeply with me as I've gone on the disciplined agile learning journey. So let's do that. Let's turn this phrase. In the councils of management, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence. Management still needs influence, but we must not let management acquire unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the agile industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. When the power to make decisions is taken away from the work, when managers with distance leadership disorder call the shots, we have the curse of the agile industrial complex. How awkward that I speak to you about this today. I'm a charter member of the Agile Industrial Complex. So let me speak to this a little bit. We launched SAFE at Siemens 3 to 4 years ago. And of course, we were in a hurry. Are we not always in a hurry? How do you hurry responsibly? Disciplined Agile informs us that there are several various Agile frameworks that would help. They would probably be a good place to start, but they would not get your organization to be agile. So Disciplined Agile talks about and gives you the pluses and minuses of many options like less, nexus, safe, others. But for many reasons at Siemens, we chose SAFe. I had had implementation experience prior with SAFe, so I was predisposed to it. Another key reason, of course, was we sell software to support SAFe at Siemens. So why not become our own reference customer for our Polarian product? So all of these things were at play. But in our rollout, we made a critical decision. And in my point of view, it was a critical failing on my part. So I will just bare my soul here and say I believe this is part of my own growing edge, part of a place where I made a terrible mistake. We decided that all teams would launch with Scrum. And we went out and did our Safe for Teams training and made it clear to everybody, you're all doing Scrum. So we went out to 900 people on launch day, a couple days before, and we said, it's Scrum. My personal persistent case of distance leadership disorder was reaching its peak. It was cresting. Now, to be honest, I knew better. I could never be close enough to make a good decision for all these teams. Disciplined Agile informs us that teams should choose from any number of life cycles. They could choose continuous delivery lean, continuous delivery agile, DA lean, DA agile, DA programs, LESS, Nexus, safe, exploratory, Scrum's life cycle, or even, believe it or not, traditional waterfall. But we forced the issue. We forced everybody. All 130 teams launched on Tuesday. 12 ARTs took off all at once, also against standard guidance from SAFe. It worked out, by the way. And they all had to do Scrum. I would call this a tragedy. But as Martin Fowler says in his speech, it was a travesty. I learned a hard lesson about coaching here. About 10 teams really needed to be on lean, also known as Kanban. About 70 teams were much, much closer to XP than Scrum. These guys were hardcore software engineers. So these guys and gals reflected with us in our after-action reviews. Our retrospectives told us we need to make some adjustments. And we did. In truth, all was well. The implementation was wildly successful. But personally, I know it could have been better. All we had to do was ask the people doing the work, how would you do the work? They would have got it right the first time, I believe, with proper coaching. With proper guided continuous improvement on the part of project managers, scrum masters, team leaders, whatever the name is, they would have got it right. And you know what? Even if they got it wrong, they would have changed their life cycles quicker if they were empowered to do so, because they're right on the ground looking at the problem, feeling it every day. We forgot something very fundamental about our engineers. These people are masters of software engineering. They are purpose-driven to build the world's best life-critical PLM software. This software helps put our dreams in the heavens, putting satellites above our head. This software helps huge companies in Brazil create shoes to put on our children's feet. All that these teams needed was the autonomy to run the process. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose, the holy trinity of intrinsic motivation. I will do it better next time. You should too. I guess perhaps I'm a closeted fan of Taylorism, and I want to control everything. I do love a good process document. It's a bit of catnip for me, or since I'm from Kentucky, I'll say maybe it's a nice glass of Kentucky bourbon. As a lean agilist, you will hear the refrain over and over again. Write down the good practices and make everyone follow them. And it'll be phrased as best practices. Please remember our old oxymoron friend up above, standard work. Standard work says that every team should be designing their own work. They should be designing their own process. They should be continuously, empirically improving it. The safe processes that we put in 3 years ago at Siemens have all been modified. They've been heavily modified because there's the safe way to do things, there's the industry way to do things, and then there's the Siemens way to do things. Our local context is incredibly important. If you looked at our big room planning sessions for program increment planning, they're immensely different from what they were 3 years ago, because they've been dialed in. And in fact, our release train engineers are now so expert that they change the agendas almost every time based on what's going on and what they need to do. In my bubble, at least, the little world that I live in, and where I earn my living and make my contribution to, teams and Siemens and society and the world, it's abundantly clear. No one person could or should try to write down the process for 130 teams. The only thing it would be is very wrong, especially since we're in the realms of knowledge work. Yet, so many of us are confronted by people who want the process written down. And so many of us, myself included, are comforted by having a clear process. We will attempt to write it all down. And please, do not take me to mean here that nothing should be written down. On the contrary, when building life-critical software with business-critical dollars, it is essential that many things get recorded for transparency and clarity. We need to leave behind the right residue so people can understand why we made the decisions that we made when we made them. And there's nothing worse than writing some code, not doing a good job commenting it, and having to come back 7 months later and figure out why you wrote it that way in the first place. I mean, there are some practices we should adopt. That standard work should be agreed to at the team level, at the team of teams level, at the organization level. There should be appropriate guidance at each level that fits. But really it comes down to, it is just who, when, and how much of these things should happen. So I'll just go on and say excessive documentation is as bad as no documentation. Trying to write everything down is trying to catch sunshine in a bag. But one thing you should write down is the definition of standard work. We should be asking our teams to go out and constantly improve their process, and in their retrospectives, have items that come back through and go into their backlog and talk about improving the process. Here's a classic one. With large global teams, Scrum would tell us we want to take 2 hours, 4 hours a week, or 4 hours every sprint, and do iteration planning. If you have a global team where the time zone overlap is just a couple of hours a week, doing sprint planning in 4-hour meetings is going to really make somebody stay up very late or somebody get up very early. This is 100% not sustainable. Sustainable practice will tell us we need to do something else. And so the teams will say, we'll do sprint planning periodically during the week, 2 or 3 times a week, or maybe we'll do it once a week. But we'll spread these ceremonies out. We'll be more continuous. And I think that for older people like myself, having a meeting is the thing that makes sense. But I see people coming up now who are digital natives, who are using applications every day, who are constantly in communication with their friends, who are out on Snapchat and know where everybody is within the nearest 20 miles. They're not really needing to have these formal, stodgy old ceremonies. So what I would say is join me personally in reflecting on this frequently. Ask yourself, am I being part of the Agile industrial complex as a project manager, development manager, whatever your role is? Am I ignoring the benefits of standard work? Do I suffer, and I personally do suffer, from distance leadership disorder, thinking I can reach out and help people when I don't really know what their problems are? Am I blocking distributed decision-making through my actions? These things happen, and by the way, it's okay. No one is perfect, and we sometimes will do these things. Anti-patterns exist. Anti-patterns are not a sign of personal weakness or stupidity. They just are. We need to adapt to them. Adapt to yourself. Fix yourself before you go out and pester other people. Personally, I find what drives me into the anti-pattern is the heresy of not having enough time. It causes me to charge forward. So there's some impulse that comes to me. Something's broken in the CI/CD harness. You must go forward and fix that. You jump into action. There's an impulse and there's an action. A good agilist, a good coach, a good project manager is going to try to have things organized so there's a little bit of a delay between the impulse and the action. So haste will lead us to sin. Try not to be hasty once you receive the impulse. And perhaps more honestly than even that, ego gets in the way. We all have egos, and we need to stand down, hold fast, take courage, and admit that we're wrong. And think about the fact that the agile industrial complex will lead to premature corporate demise. And it truly, truly will. Destroy the agile industrial complex if you must fight it. Better yet, don't let it come up. Do not let it rise. Do not let it get started. We need to sustain our companies in healthy ways. So the second thing I'd like you all to work on is this premature corporate demise that's going on. It's a real and very scary thing. In this age of disruption as a business model, companies are now only living about 20 years on the stock exchanges. 5 decades ago, it was 3 times longer or more. It depends where you Google. This is very bad. We depend on companies to sustain us financially, to grow our societies. Our beloved enterprises should do good while doing very well financially. How can we help them innovate? It is time for the real-time project manager to emerge. The notion of extreme programming and Scrum is all based on short iterations and sprints. Agile focuses on the delivery of an increment of the work periodically to bring value in. Whatever you define value is, it could be money, it could be components, it could be pieces of the product. The notion is inspect and adapt every period, 2 weeks or so, and start to bring in the revenue. This was an extraordinarily competitive notion 20 years ago. The Agile Manifesto has some dust on the book jacket these days. It's a bit musty. From the original cohort, XP people like Kent Beck seem to have foreseen the future better than some, or perhaps they weren't as interested in commercialization and marketing of Agile. I mean, who knows? Let's not ascribe motivations to these folks. But the root issue here is every iteration, every week is too slow. We are going headlong into real-time everything. This notion is being born all around us. The great cycle will not be suppressed. Corporations, public and private enterprises, locked into sustainment modes must face this coming destruction of the old way. Iterations just won't do it. They need the help of project managers to realize that DevOps, in all its forms, is going to dominate the future. It seems apocryphal, possibly just an aphorism, but it is said that Amazon releases code every 10 seconds. That notion's worth a Google. See how often Amazon, LinkedIn, Facebook, some of the other bigs, the apex predators of software engineering, see how often they release software. This is the story, though. My favorite department store where I love to go and browse things and see what's going on and look at all the fine clothes. Building their website on a six-month release schedule won't work. That department store is dead. They perhaps don't know they're dead yet, but that schedule is not competitive now. It will be laughable in 10 years with pathos in a sorrowful kind of way, because I do love my big retail stores. I also love Amazon, but we all can't work for Jeff. Other companies need our skills to come into the new age. We need organizations to sustain us and our families and our societies and the world. So I would loop back now, close, and deliver you off to your evenings with your families and friends. And just reflect on this. Speaking with my colleague, my good friend Mandar from Pune, we thought about our mad world, our mad COVID world, and we shared some of these notions with each other. As project managers, Mandar and I felt privileged that we can still work when so many cannot. All of us working do probably have 3 other families who depend on us to sustain them through our economic activities, whatever those activities be. Think of them and bring them along with you. I was personally touched by how much Mandar is helping others who cannot work. He's now carrying them for a time until they can resume their normal activities. There's probably 3 families in Pune that he is helping, and within his community, he's encouraging other people to do the proper things and to also help. So this inspired me to put on my mask, get out and help a bit. And of course, Mandar and I feel privileged to be project managers. And we are privileged by this great opportunity, to lead in this great cycle of destruction, creation. And we do hope soon to get back to sustainment. It would be so nice to see COVID submit. And my biggest hope is for pharma in India, because we all know who has the muscle to create the vaccines for 8 billion people in the world. It is India. So with that, I will say good night and be well. And thank you once again for supporting PMI. I cannot tell you how much your patronage means to me, just in terms of the Disciplined Agile Book of Knowledge that's there. It's just wonderful what we've all done together. We are better together. And I'm a little choked up. It's just magnificent. So that ends my presentation. And I think somebody else can take the ball back.
Andy, thank you very much for this session.
Thank you.
Namaskar back to you as well.
I appreciate that.
So for me, this was an eye-opener session and a wake-up call, because the theme of this entire conference being resilient agile, we mostly sing themes to agile, or we talk about leveraging agile, but we seem not to be aware of the stark realities of the influence of agile industrial complex. And you gave a stark reminder by drawing a comparison with the military industrial complex, and that was quite scary to me, and like I said, an eye-opener. And I think we should we probably are overlooking the fact that whatever agile tried to replace when it came in, it's becoming that itself.
It is. The other thing that I would add in is all of these agile tools, all of which Disciplined Agile embraces, are very much part of the Agile industrial complex. Scrum, in the Scrum Guide, says if you're not doing exactly this, and this, you're not doing Scrum. And in fact, all of them say things like this. Disciplined Agile, and it's really interesting. PMI is the only group in the world that's saying choice is good. They're the only ones that are standing up to the Agile industrial complex. And I've never been more proud to be a PMI member than I am right now. And I say this to people all the time. It's just, to me, it's a little crazy, because you think of PMI and you think of, heavyweight process and project managers and all the things that the Agile community has railed against for the past 10 years. And then here comes PMI with Disciplined Agile. So the Disciplined Agile acquisition with PMI is not even a year old yet. I've been privileged to become an instructor and to meet the core cadre of thought leaders that now work for PMI. So you've got Scott Ambler, you've got Mark Lyons, you have Alan Shalloway. This is just a radical departure that our new president has, our new CEO at PMI, Sunil, has brought. And I just never have been more proud to be part of this organization. So it's good. It's a good thing. And something new is being born, and we're watching it right now. It's just fantastic.
Right. And it's very interesting to see that as well. And we also understand that as project managers, and especially attached to PMI, it's a great responsibility that rests on our shoulders to resurrect the world with more contextual decisions, like you said, and empower teams to take decisions on their own so that we don't get caught in the web of oxymorons like standard work.
Well, it's hard too, because none of us are probably comfortable with that. Many of us have decades of experience where, as a manager, my value was telling people what to do. And now as a manager, we come to know that my value is empowering people to make decisions and watching the work instead of the people, and making sure the business value is flowing. And, the new paradigm is really quite incredible. And again, nobody but PMI has really grasped this fact. Wow, and the name of the book is Wow.
Yeah.
So it's really quite incredible.
Yeah, and that's the feeling that I have in my mind also. Wow, after the session, we'll take it to our hearts to introspect if we are blocking distributed decision making, like you said, and are we respecting the holy trinity of autonomy, mastery, and purpose when we take the projects forward. So thank you once again, Andy. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Looks like we have some questions. So you talked about a change in mindset that we have to undertake as managers, but there will be a morning after, right? And how do you think this change can be sustained when we maybe the world has changed for good, but if it hasn't, we go back to our normal routines. How do you think this change, which is for the better, can be sustained?
I'm not sure the world will ever go back to the same. And I hope it doesn't in terms of sustainability. And I hope that many more people get to work remotely. I really do hope that stays full time. And the other thing I would say is, don't think you can just change yourself and say, okay, I'm going to stop being a Taylorist command and control manager. Don't think you can just snap your fingers and magically it will happen. You will fall backwards. The anti-patterns will emerge. The question is, can you let go of your ego enough, and can you take courage enough to say, I've made a mistake? And then also, it's important to communicate to other people when they are making these mistakes, but to do it in a nonviolent way. And by nonviolent, I mean, you need to communicate to people. Our teams need to be involved in these decisions. We need the people that have the best information to be involved. And we shouldn't be making this decision in this room 10 miles or 100 miles or 1,000 miles away from where the team is actually trying to fix whatever they're trying to fix. And if you speak to people about the needs of the organization and teams and all the people, it does help to pull people back. But never be critical of yourself or anyone else for falling back into the anti-patterns. It is natural. We're all imperfect. And frankly, that's a good thing, because at Siemens, if we were not all imperfect, we wouldn't have had this great reservoir of different ideas to deal with the COVID crisis. And we really were saved by that. We had several teams who were doing unique things that were a little bit crazy, but as we looked at them now, our productivity has gone up by doing what they've been telling us. So it's been quite incredible.
Okay. So I think you've answered the second question that had come up as well. The second question was how can the team members be informed or be included in this change process, which you have already communicated, which you already discussed now. So I think that's about.
One interesting thing that we do at Siemens is we break our work down into epics, capabilities, features, and stories. And, we estimate things all up and down this hierarchy of work. So capabilities are the parents of features, are the parents of stories. But we take the development team's estimates of stories and we roll them back up to the top levels. And at every level in the organization, we say, here's what we originally guessed.
Okay.
And here's what the team told us it actually was. And what we've done is we've empowered the team with a feedback loop that goes all the way back to the executive's office. And individuals on a team may not realize this, but when they're making that initial estimate, they're helping everyone to understand and everyone to get better. So it does take some enlightenment in your leadership to realize that they might be wrong, and that's okay as well. We all learn together. We need to be a learning organization on how we estimate and plan things. And we also need to look at things that are valid, like the mean time to deliver a feature, because at the end of the day, the customers don't care about anything else except for how long will it take you to deliver this thing for me. And we all need to be on the same page about what that is and how we can make that better. So there's lots of metrics and things that are, I call them watermelon metrics. They're always green on the outside, but they're red in the middle. And we try to avoid those, or vanity metrics, and we try to look at things that make sense to customers. But they always have to come from the engineers. And our engineers are, they're the smartest people in the room, and everybody tends to forget that. They really are, and we couldn't do their jobs. We need to get them in the loop. So it's good.
Okay. Thank you very much, Andy. Once again, it's a pleasure to present to you with the Sankalp Saru tree. Not sure if you've heard of that. We are planting a tree on your behalf with your name tagged to it. The certificate that you see on the screen is the QR code for those trees that are planted in your name, in your honor. You can scan the QR code and see the progress of that tree. Hope the world also progresses after COVID. Like the last slide that you showed, right? Hope. It's a hope. This is the tree of hope. Thank you very much. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and also thanks to you for supporting our UDAN program, which is helping the children that are in need by sponsoring their education. So a donation has been made to them in your name as well.
Thank you so much. It's a true kindness.
Thank you, Andy. Nimi, over to you.
Thank you, Pradeep. So that was the last of today's sessions, and I hope everybody must have enjoyed it. So thank you everyone for participating.